everyone. I'm Rutura Mishra, your host for People of Space series, where we talk with young professionals, students, and experts from the space industry and get to know more about their space journey. And in this particular episode, with us, we have Priya Abiram.
Inspire the world, a brand new face. Welcome to the people of space.
Hello, Priya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and let me take this moment to introduce you to our audience. So, she has the privilege of being an aspiring astronaut and an entrepreneur, currently pursuing aerospace engineering at the Cornell University. She has an impressive journey, including internships at Blue Origin, Boeing, NASA Kennedy Space Center, and Invergent Space. She is a licensed private pilot, analog astronaut, and a passionate STEAM advocate. Her dedication to the advancing space exploration and her commitment to improving life on Earth through technological innovation makes her an inspiring figure in the aerospace community. Once again, welcome, Priya. And I would especially like to mention that thank you for taking out time during your exam schedule and being here with us for the interview.
Of course, I
So,
love the mission that you guys on.
thank you. So, your journey is so inspiring. So, can you tell us what was the very first memory that sparked your love for space?
Of course, yeah. So one of my first few memories that sparked my love for space is when I was very early on at the young age of 7. My family used to travel a lot, and one of our stops was at the NASA Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center down at Florida. And I remember just being a very small girl walking around, seeing these huge machines that touch the sky, not knowing anything about what they were. And I remember being told that, those are rockets. They're the hardest thing man has ever built, and it's even harder to fly in it. And later that day, I met an astronaut himself, and that entire day was just very inspiring. Seeing someone do the hardest thing that one has ever done was very inspiring, and learning about their experience and learning about what they do was also very intriguing. And that they sort of sparked an idea that now turned into the goal of my life.
That's perfect. I mean, for many of us, it is the same thing, right? We see something very small and ordinary, it kind of ignites our passion for space. And then we look up to it and eventually begin a journey in this vast sector. So you were talking that you met an astronaut and you saw him do the impossible and that inspired you. So now can you tell us more about your experience as training citizen science astronaut and your work in microgravity?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a bioastronautics researcher with the International Institute of Astronautical Sciences, and was sort of one of my first initial real like openings and viewings of like what it's sort of like to train to become an astronaut, what it's sort of like to do all these things in terms of, going in a rocket, what comes right before that, what's required of me in order to do that. So in IIS, I've done a couple different courses. In our first opening course, I had the chance to fly on small jets, and we were pulling like 6.5 Gs, doing barrel rolls, loop spins, some really awesome fun like aerobatic acrobatic flying. I've worked with and tested spacesuits, so wearing and taking off spacesuits, being pressurized in a spacesuit, learning the effects of what the spacesuit can do to our mobility by physically wearing the spacesuit and trying to walk around in it, trying to jump in it, trying to pick an object up in it. When you're wearing a spacesuit that's pressurized, your joint movements are all restricted. For example, your elbow, you cannot move all the way up and down. You can't really bend forward. It's almost like being a pregnant woman can't like bend forward to pick something up. So you kind of have to squat on your knees and, lean over to the side to pick up a water bottle. And all these mobility issues are especially amplified when in space. If you have your tool that like falls off when you're on the moon, or if you have things floating around and you're doing spacewalks, and your peripheral view is also restricted. So kind of like, talking about what is lacking in current technologies and how to improve current technologies to meet the needs and requirements of one day being able to go to Mars and one day being able to build colonies. A couple other experiences I've had with IIS is writing and publishing a couple papers. I was able to publish or get a peer edited and published paper of like harvesting geothermal energy on Mars that I published on the National Journal of Science, and I presented in the International Astronautical Conference, which is the largest conference of all aerospace leaders and aerospace people around the world. It usually has like 9,000 to 11,000 people every year, hosted in different locations each year. So 2 years ago, I was able to present my research in Paris, and I was honored to win second place in the International Student Research Award. So that was it. It was a very it was sort of like a very humbling and also reminding moment, being the only girl on stage filled with a lot of very accomplished men in aerospace. And I got a lot of people coming up to me after mentioning and noting of the same. And that's another aspect of aerospace that I'm passionate about, is diversity and inclusion and removing barriers for all. A couple other things I've done with IIS, I've done microgravity flights. So doing parabolic flights with the Canadian National Research Council. So we used the similar planes that the Canadian astronauts trained to be in microgravity, and right before they go to space, we use those planes to just do microgravity training. And what that entails is your plane kind of takes off, it does a parabola in the sky, and it comes, and then it like settles back, and then does another parabola and settles back. And right before each parabola, you're pulling about 2 Gs, and right after you're pulling like 2 more Gs. But we have about 20 seconds at the apogee of microgravity. And microgravity is basically when you're able to unbuckle and you are floating, and you are simulating what it's like to be in space and you are floating. So while I was floating, I operated a bunch of payloads. For example, a handheld gun that 3D prints skin to see how would surgery and wound healing look like in space and long-term colonizations. I did a payload that explores the distortion and like situational awareness and action in microgravity. And then I helped operate a few other payloads looking at like fluids, helping with like looking at like spacesuits and changes to our body, stuff like that. And then another experience with IIS is also doing egress operations training. So that was more of like underwater training. So we went out to the IIS version of our neutral buoyancy lab in Groton, Connecticut, and kind of looking at like, failures and emergencies, how to prepare for that, how to be ready for that, and more importantly, how to survive them. When your rocket takes off and then descends, hopefully everything goes smoothly, you get off the pad and you get back to your landing spot. But a lot of time, at any point during failure or landing, there can sort of be abort scenarios. And abort is when your rocket, we know that the vehicle is malfunctioning, and if we continue to be in the vehicle that's malfunctioning, it would pose a serious concern to our health, and just like a serious concern to being alive. So at that point, we would press the abort button, which would basically just eject the capsule, separates the capsule away from the rocket. And when this capsule is separated, you might probably end up like, in an ocean, in water. So like if your door is stuck, how do you get out? How do you, jump from high altitudes, getting into like doing a lot of survival skills out in the open. So a lot of stuff like that. And then I've also done a couple analog astronaut missions. So that was also a really cool experience, spending about a week out in Hawaii on top of a volcano in isolation. With high seas, which is an analog astronaut habitat. And what being an analog astronaut basically means you are simulating what it's like to be in space. So we did a 1-week lunar simulation. So 1 week on top of a volcano in Hawaii with zero connection to the outside world. So no phones, no phone calls, no video calls, none of it. The only way we could communicate was via email. And then, we had to ration our food. We had this exact same food, similar food of like dehydrated powder foods that astronauts have in the space station or astronauts would have for future space missions. So how to cook food, how to do chores, doing like an hour or two of exercise every single day, and then doing research. So testing different components of spacesuits or testing different like rovers and systems, doing a bunch of spacewalks. So we put on our suits and then we went out to the volcanic terrain, which we simulated to be the lunar environment. And we then went into lava flows and like these little canals within the volcano. So we were climbing down holes and rocks, wearing our spacesuits, climbing into these volcanoes, going into these huge caves where some of which no one has ever explored before. So yeah, those were some of my experiences so far, and it's been a very rewarding journey.
I mean, I am in awe. You have experienced so much, and it's so enriching to learn from you that this hands-on experience actually help us build our journey in space. So while you were
Yes.
talking, you mentioned a few things, and I would like to touch on them, starting with
Yeah.
bioastronautics. It is a very
Yes.
new term, I would say, and
Yeah.
many people do not know about it. So will you please elaborate for an audience that what exactly is bioastronautics and any projects that specifically you've worked on?
Yes, bioastronautics is the study of sort of health and people in space. The space environment is not very friendly. We don't have oxygen. We don't have the moon and Mars. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere. The Martian atmosphere is filled with methane and carbon dioxide, which is extremely poisonous to the human body. We don't have gravity. Not having gravity would result in decreased heart functions, decreased bone density, decreased fluid flow across the body. Basically, humans are built to be on Earth. So once you take humans away from Earth, humans are not built to survive in space. So inherently, space is trying to kill you. And bioastronautics is more so the study or the field of like, how can we combat that? What technologies can we use? And how can we create and sustain life in a place where life is not really sustainable or human life is not really sustainable for the sake of exploration? So that's sort of what bioastronautics revolves around. And then in terms of my experiences in that places, I was talking about some of the spacesuit work I did on the analog astronaut habitat, doing the microgravity flights. So looking at like human bodily changes and operating payloads in microgravity, as well as the spacecraft egress and rescue operations. It's a professional course on like landing, post-landing phase of manned spacecraft missions, doing like, what to do if it's a normal landing of the rocket, what to do if there's an emergency situation, how to deal with different emergency situations, and just looking at like, and overall with IIS, multiple educational like journeys with like how to combat high G forces, how to work with spacesuits. We got a chance to go into a hypoxia chamber. Hypoxia chamber is basically, when usually all these systems are pressurized, meaning you have air flowing through a container. When there is a hole in this container, so say an asteroid or a space rock comes and hits the space station. Now comes and hits the oxygen tank. Now you have fluid, which is the air contained flowing out of this hole in the leak, because space is a vacuum. There is no atmosphere and anything in the vacuum of space. So once you put a hole in this pressurized container, you have oxygen being depleted from your system. What a hypoxia chamber basically does is it puts me or the person inside the hypoxia chamber in a condition of low oxygen. So what they do is you kind of go inside this contained room. They take, like those black devices that check for your pulse and blood oxygen levels. You put that on your finger, you go in, you check to make sure like your pulse is normal, your blood oxygen level is like whatever nominal it is, it's like 70, 75%, something like that, whatever the normal conditions are. Make sure everyone's blood oxygens are normal, and then we keep our like little device on, and what they start doing is they start reducing the oxygen inside the room. They start intentionally depleting the oxygen from the room, and you can see visibly your like little pulse meters telling you that like now my blood oxygen is 70%, 65%, 50%, 55%. And as my blood oxygen was decreasing along with those around me, and during this, we didn't know that our blood ox, like we weren't just like sitting there. We were kind of in a aircraft simulation. So we had like a pilot, we had a co-pilot, we had like mission specialists doing a bunch of jobs and tasks. We were given checklists. So we were kept busy. We were doing science, we were doing research, and we were doing our missions while being in this hypoxia chamber. And they gradually start reducing the amount of oxygen present in the air around us, and our bodies gradually starts decreasing the levels of our oxygen. And I was able to see a lot of the different ways that can affect different people. One of my friends sitting right next to me, his face turned almost pale and bluish. My other friend, I could see like he was visibly like a little dizzy, a little giddy, like started talking like much, much less. Me, once my blood oxygen started like going to the lower, and I was laughing go up. I was super euphoric. I didn't know what was happening around me. I thought everything is awesome. I thought life is great. And I just kept laughing, and I couldn't stop laughing. So that's like the condition of like, euphoria, and everyone's body reacts differently to having oxygen depleted from you. And the purpose of that exercise was so that what you need to be on the lookout for when that happens in a real situation. If the spacecraft is being depressurized without your awareness, or if you're in an airplane and your airplane cabin is being depressurized without your awareness, you know how you react when you are in a condition of like hypoxia. And being aware of your own personal symptoms makes you realize like, so now I know if like I'm in an aircraft or if I'm in space and I just like randomly start being super euphoric and start laughing a lot, there's depressurization. And that's sort of what, so the study of bioastronautics is kind of like learning about how your body reacts to different conditions, and how to just like, being aware of how can we bring life in a place where there is not.
That's like, I mean, I could just visualize when you were giving us this example, because this is very true. We still have very, like, not on that greater extent, but at some extent, we do have situations on ISS where there is a certain debris coming in, or there is a meteor that might hit and puncture the air circulation system right within the ISS. So the simulations, this analogs, the studies that we are doing would actually help us in this real life space scenarios. So it's very much important to popularize this and keep doing this so that we have research that will help us in our way forward. So you talked about an analog mission that you have done. So it was a lunar analog mission, but is there any Mars analog mission that you have done? And was there any particular challenge during the entire mission that you had to deal with, and all the team came together and worked on it and got the solution? Was there any scenario like that?
So the mission that I did at high seas, it was 1 week long, which is why we counted it as a lunar mission, and then the 2-week version was counted as the Mars mission. But I believe it inherently comes down to a very similar exercise and sort of a similar situation of being in isolation. Particular problems we came through that were fun, hard, interesting to solve? Yes, there were a couple. We had a lot of what they call anomalies being thrown into our system. Anomalies are basically things that go wrong or things that go differently from what's actually planned. And how do you combat that? How do you solve those issues? How do you solve those problems? So we were the only person, like I said again, we could kind of like talk to, like we had 30 minutes of communication time with ground control from like 5 to 5:30 p.m. every single day. And that's the only time we had comms back with Earth. Every other time we had no comms with Earth. Earth did not know what we were doing. So we would just email them like our schedule for the next day, like the night before, and we would get approval by the morning. And then we would go out on our schedule. And then mission control would, if every so often throw us a bunch of anomalies, and we would have to, one, identify some anomaly, two, go out and solve it. So we had a lot of fun with those. It was a really good like kind of team bonding exercise. I will say there were a couple anomalies that I wasn't able to solve myself. So it's technically, when you're technically unable to solve an anomaly, that means that either their people are harmed or you die. So, but given that this is all a simulation, that's kind of what you train for. That's what astronauts train for before they go to space for a week or for a month. They go through 2.5 years of dedicated, consistent training of all the possible things that can go wrong and how to solve it. And so I did a week of that. One of my, let me think. So a couple, I'd say one of the anomalies that we were given was, so I will say I was kind of, I took on the lead of being the chief scientist of the mission. And I also led our EVAs. EVAs are our extravehicular activities, meaning that's every time we leave the habitat, we go out, and this part I said about climbing into like the volcanoes and lava flows. So that was our EVAs, and we were like kind of climbing into these really small contained holes and tunnels. I remember some of those entrances deep down into Earth and going into these caves were not very stable, meaning the rocks were just like, when you put your foot on a rock, it just falls off immediately, just slides off immediately. And you're wearing a spacesuit. You're not wearing a t-shirt and pants. You're wearing a spacesuit with a helmet and an oxygen mask and gloves with like a full thermal regulation system inside, trying to climb down this volcanic hole with rocks that are not cooperating with you. So that was a very fun experience that I enjoyed. We came up with very creative solutions of like, how to measure safety factors, how to measure points of stability. And it's one of those things where once you decide to fully go down, you are inherently taking the risk of not being able to come back, because the path down might not always be possible to come back, because it's usually easier to go down holes than come back up out of holes. So we had like huge, like, human ladder systems of like, all right, let's take one step and one step. And I remember being on the more, in every group, we have like the more excited, adventurous people, we have the more cautious people, and then we have like the people in the middle. And I think it's important to have a balance of the entire spectrum in different cases. But given that this was my first analog mission, I was super on the excited mission. So I was like climbing down these holes without even thinking if I would be able to climb out of them. I was going into all these dark caves and tunnels, some of which I don't even know, some have been to. At one point, I didn't even know where I was, but I just like, trying to turn around and going back, making sure we have enough flashlights, because after a certain point, there was no light to the outside world. We were fully inside the cave, the tunnel, inside this volcano. But some of those views that I saw and experienced there are views that I'll remember forever. A couple anomalies that we faced during this mission, we had like this one anomaly where we had half of our team member held inside the base our habitat, and then me and another team member was going out. We were going out on our EVA, and then we had to do, I believe it was like a fuel replacement, like a gas tank replacement. And it was like the anomaly was there was a game that was created to do a bunch of math and calculations and undo a bunch of bolts and screws and assemble all these things under a time constraint. So we were talking to our people back in the base to do a lot of calculations for us. We were receiving commands from mission control. So one person was on the walkie-talkie talking to people back at home. One person was on the walkie-talkie talking back to mission control. And then we were both trying to read this box, trying to open it, trying to fix it. And we had like a 30-minute time constraint. So we weren't able to solve our anomaly. It proved to be quite challenging to relay math information back to the base while also build a bunch of things while also talk to mission control. And that was one of the things that they were focusing on, efficient communication, being able to work fast under pressure. If this was the real situation, it would have to be done under 30 minutes. So there's really no option ever of failing an anomaly in a reality sense. When you're in space, you don't fail an anomaly, you need to fix it or else you're going to die. So it's one of those situations that, you learn and you experience. It was a lot of fun. And there were a lot of those scattered throughout the week.
Amazing. This your experience takes back to my own experience where I did an analog mission at Analog Astronaut Training Center in Poland, and we were giving a similar anomaly to solve. So right from making the choice of people who are going to go out to deal with, to evacuating the rest of the crew, maintaining the communication with comms and
Right.
your team back on it was such a chaos. But we were able to solve it and we took
That's
our
awesome.
yeah. But in the meantime, we kind of messed up with our water purification system. And then the fridge that we were using to store our food was also damaged in the process. So there
Oh
can
no.
be so many problems that come at you at the same moment, and the psychological pressure that it puts because you're completely isolated from everyone and the crew that you're with is relatively new. So it's
Yes.
I can imagine how the situation would have been for you, but it's always fun to learn from these mistakes and these experiences, right?
Oh yes. They're great and they're fun.
Yeah. So, apart from these amazing analog experiences, you have also been involved in designing a lunar dust vacuum system. So, can you tell us a bit more about it and how was your experience and any other technology specifically you believe would be helpful in becoming a spacefaring civilization?
So from a very young age, I've always had sort of that's more of my entrepreneurial side of passion for building new technologies, creating new things, and exploring and combining and kind of looking at the future. So I, since high school and stuff, being in the robotics team, filing a patent for an innovation we did for people who are visually impaired, going to a bunch of innovation competitions, doing energy competitions, talking about creating energy from plastic, building a solar powered portable chair with a windmill and a solar panel to charge your phone, on the beach without the need for a wall to plug in your outlet. I've always, and then doing research on different stuff, how do we improve different aspects of our spacesuit, writing papers in school for how can we use astronaut life support technology to improve the safety of toddler seats for cars, newborn and toddlers have toddler seats in cars. So I did a little project for my AP seminar class, my junior year of high school, using multiple aspects of the astronaut exercise system to improve the toddler car seat. And then there was the lunar dust buster idea. So that was through the NASA L-Space Academy, which I really recommend for everyone who's able to apply and eligible to apply. It was a really good experience. There are two aspects of NASA L-Space. There is the NPW, which is the proposal writing, and then there's the Mission Concept Academy. The NPW proposal writing, you're basically put into teams. You come up with an idea, a solution, a technology that is beneficial for space exploration. And there is a huge range of solutions that all sorts of teams come up with. And then you have each team has their main project manager, deputy project manager, the aerospace engineer, the scientist, the CS person. And then you write this proposal on a technology that you think would be really good and showing that you have the resources to do it. So it's basically like proposal writing and grant writing. And then you submit it to NASA L-Space. And out of all the teams that submit through this academy, and throughout this academy, you're not just writing it on your own every week or bi-weekly. We have like webinars and trainings of like how to write a proposal, how to come up with ideas, how to work with a team. So all really important, great skills to know and learn. And then at the end of it, they have we have a final competition, and then one team out of all the different teams is awarded about $10,000 to go out and build a prototype of whatever they propose and give it to NASA for advancing technology. So that is a lot. That was a lot of fun. The other aspect of that is the Mission Concept Academy. So that is more on devise a mission that will take you from Earth to Pluto or Earth to Mars. That one's also a lot of fun. I haven't done the Mission Concept Academy yet, but through NPW, we wrote the proposal on the Lunar Dust Buster. There was basically a technology of using infrared light to excite particles to kind of get particles to move away from surfaces. So I guess in simpler terms, or I guess for context, when there's no air or atmosphere on the moon, so so the footprints of like Neil Armstrong are still there, untouched. You can see the feet of previous astronauts that walked on the moon. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing, because when you have a tool sitting, like a screwdriver sitting on the surface of the moon for 20 years, and there's dust over this tool, the dust is not going to move away. So when you're building colonies and stuff, there's no air to circulate and regulate any sort of dust or particle movement across different surfaces in lunar terrain. And sometimes that can be quite harmful to whatever it is that you're building or whatever it is that exists. So our technology or our idea was, looking into the science of how the particles within dust sort of work. So doing a lot of science and research there, and understanding how electrons get excited, how to induce movement into these dust particles, and how to get them to fall off sort of automatically with the help of certain light sources. So that was the proposal that I wrote.
Amazing. I myself tried applying to the Space concept proposal writing program, but I guess there are some criteria that you need to fit in. So I was not able to fit in the citizenship, but our audience can go and definitely check out the website, try and see if you fit into the criteria, because as it sounds, it's a great experience. So catering to your passion for building new things and your entrepreneurial spirit, you've also developed visual eyes for the visually impaired and renewable energy solution. So what is this project and what is the broader mission for it?
Yeah, that one was really fun one. And that's one that's very close to my heart, because at the end of it, we went through the process of trying to file a patent, and I led my team into kind of creating that technology. And I'd say that was one of the things that was most practical and came into the most amount of fruition. It's basically a hat with ultrasonic sensors, with LiDARs, with a NVIDIA and stuff arranged at the top, top of this hat. And then you basically have these sensors coming out of the sides of the hat that are all wired. And through a Bluetooth connection, it connects with an app on your phone that we also created. And this entire innovation is called Visualize. So it's kind of like Hey Siri. So it's like, Hey Siri, open up Google or whatever. But it's like for visually impaired people, it's like, hey, visualize, find me a chair. And then the crown of sensors at the crown of sensors at the top of this hat already has an LLM model built into it that we, got off of open source and kind of scans the room around, identifies the object that you're asking for, and says, walk 5 steps forward, 1 step to the left, and your chair is to the left of you. So it is a tool that is used for visually impaired people to regain a sense of independency, to be able to elevate their lifestyle and be able to, enjoy their individuality. Right now, what exists and what works is more so of just like a cane or like a walking stick. There aren't a lot of fleshed out technologies that are necessarily affordable for visually impaired people. So we have an app on the phone where you're like, hey, visualize, find me a chair. And it does this for you. Hey, visualize, find me a table. And then we have a couple different models within our app that where you can upload custom objects into your little database. So all you have to do is like take a picture of like a special object. If you use it regularly, take a picture, upload it, and now it's able to identify it. So we have this kind of database and we have trainers on it. We have stuff like that. So we were able to pitch it to like the Blind Veterans Association, National Federation of the Blind. We had a couple technology experts come in and like look over our work and talk to us about it. We were able to take it to and talk to people and pitch it to people that were visually impaired themselves. And it was a little heart touching because, some of them were like genuinely excited or like, oh my God, this is so awesome. I really love this. I would totally buy it if it comes in the market. And that's kind of where once we kind of heard that and then we pitched it, it was through our first robotics competition. We went to international levels in the world competition. We made, I believe, top 10 or top 5 innovations across the world. And then we had a couple news releases from like Cheddar News, Newstone, New Jersey, a bunch of senators visiting our school and stuff like that. And we were able to work with the lawyer, file it, like go through the process of, patent searching and patent filing. And it was pretty good to kind of make an impact on people around. Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, it might feel so good to, have something patent on your name and then that technology being used to help people. Right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So now let's do something fun. We'll do the rapid fire and I'll ask you the question and you can answer it in just one word. Okay?
Okay.
So favorite planet, Moon or Mars?
Mars.
Mars. I'm a Martian too. Spacesuit or lab coat?
Spacesuit. That one's easy.
If you could have a dinner with one space pioneer from past or present, who would it be?
One space pioneer.
Yeah.
This one's hard because there's so many.
I know,
I
right?
want to say I want to say Kalpana Chawla or Sally Ride.
Nice. Now describe space exploration in one word.
Space exploration in one word. Inspiration.
You go, girl. And what's your ultimate spacewalk playlist song? Is there any?
Favorite spacewalk song? Is that what you said?
Yeah, or just a song that leads you to space. Anything would work.
Oh my God. This is so favorite.
It's fine if you don't have one. No pressure.
Oh, okay. This one, can I do a little story for this one?
Oh, absolutely, go ahead.
Okay. So this one, the answer needs a little bit of context. I was at NASA Space Camp and we did an overnight simulation to Mars and I was mission commander. So overnight simulation to Mars basically means we are awake for 24 continuous hours. We didn't sleep all night. We slept the next morning around like noon after breakfast, but we were awake all day and all night, and we were given this huge checklist, and we were put inside this habitat, and we were, you know, suited up in spacesuits, doing spacewalks, hanging from ceilings. If you walk into the space camp room, there are like random people hanging from the ceiling all around, fixing bolts, replacing batteries. We were doing science in the space station, et cetera, et cetera. And we were doing this for 24 hours straight. And when you're with a group of people for 24 hours straight with zero sleep and very less food, people get frustrated. And the morale and collaboration kind of goes down. And then we had a really big anomaly close to 3 a.m. at night, at midnight. And I remember, and I was tasked with being the mission commander of all of this. So it was sort of my responsibility to make sure whatever our goals are being done, our team is doing good. I was running around everywhere and stuff like that. Close to 3 a.m., we had this really huge anomaly. And I announced it, like we follow the normal procedure of announcing an anomaly. And usually there are people that run, they're coming in, we're delegating tasks, we're trying to figure out different solutions, we're talking through things. This time, only one person came up to me. Everyone was just kind of exhausted and kind of done with it. And no one really, like, people were just like sitting on the side of the floor. People were just like, you know, oh my God, I want this simulation to be done with. And that's sort of when I realized that, like, this needs to change. This needs to change. This is a one-time experience. We need to enjoy our full 24 hours. So I got mission control on the line, and I asked them to start like first playing Cotton Eye Joe on the speakers all across our International Space Station. Little you know, before, and this was all while we were having a buzzing red light screaming emergency, emergency, emergency. And I was like, you know, the emergency light was still on. It was still screaming emergency. I didn't go and look at, like, you know, we couldn't debrief what the emergency was. But I asked Mission Control to play Cotton Eye Joe across all the speakers across the International Space Station. And as soon as the song went on, all of us, everyone kind of like got up, looked at each other, and then we started making a little circle, and we were just dancing. And we were doing that for about the next 10 minutes. We put aside the fact that there is an emergency for a hot second, and we were just dancing, we were spinning, we were laughing, having a good time. And then we came back after that so much more energized. And we were able to solve our anomaly. We were able to do so many things, and there was a much higher, and then, you know, I had like music playing at random different spots within the space station, just in case people needed to go back to that, people needed a little boost. And that's kind of like that one song that I picked that kind of took like a fully like dead, uninterested crew to now being fully functional again at 3 a.m. after a very tiring 24 hours. So I would probably say that one just because of the memories associated with it.
Fun. I mean, you at least got your crew energized and then you worked on it,
Yes.
so that counts.
It was a lot of fun.
So as we near the end of our interview, I would like to ask you, what's that one space project or a mission that you would like to be a part of that you haven't yet given a chance to be on?
One space mission or project I'd like to be a part of that I have not gotten the opportunity yet.
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is a good one. I want to go more into like I guess learning. I guess I want to just also learn about all of space in general. And also I want to be able to do more like microgravity flight and bioastronautics. I want to be able to go deeper into the field of human factors, life support, and sustaining life in space. And from an internship standpoint, I've had a couple previous internships as a design engineer and systems engineer, you know, looking at like the rocket production processes at Blue Origin, or improving like the flight deck at Boeing, or designing a drop test vehicle for parachutes at Inversion, looking at like space crop production and space plant production at NASA Kennedy Space Center. So I've had the opportunities to kind of explore different aspects of space and kind of get into the more engineering, design, system side of skills. And I really enjoyed the process of being able to design a product, being able to test it, being able to manufacture it, etc. But I want to be able to integrate that more into human life support and human sustainability and stuff like that. And also not only going into human space and human life from an engineering standpoint, but also going into it from a research and bioastronautics and science and medical standpoint. I want to, there's so many talks about like, what would like pregnancy in space look like? No one knows what like, the female periods in space look like, because we only have like no female has ever gone to the moon. We don't know what it's like for a woman to be in space for so long, because we don't have big enough of a sample population to be able to do such studies. There's so many things that we don't know yet about the human body, especially in terms of long-term space, and more importantly, the female body, because we choose not to send women, unfortunately. And I want to be able to bring a change to that and bring a change from a research perspective. And one of the things that I learned more recently, talking to the NASA director of human space systems and the NASA director of EVAs, is he said it's a lot cheaper for NASA to send a woman to do a spacewalk compared to sending a man to do a spacewalk scientifically. This is because looking at the data that they get from when an astronaut is suited up, goes and does a spacewalk, women have a different metabolism compared to men. So women can sustain in the same amount of oxygen for 1 extra hour compared to men. When men go and do spacewalks, say their spacewalk lasted 2 hours, they were able to unscrew a bunch of things, bolt a bunch of things. They might come back because their oxygen tank is depleted or empty. However, women can be able to be out there with that same oxygen capacity for 3 hours. So this saves whatever battery life, whatever electrical systems, it saves oxygen, which is quite expensive to pressurize and send up to space because of the mass. It saves a lot of money for a female to be able to do a spacewalk compared to a male. And in terms of the functionality of the woman being able to do the task versus the man doing the task, both of them can do the task pretty well. There's studies that say, women can maybe do certain stuff better than men. And there's like getting the task done has been done by both genders. Women are able to operate in lesser oxygen while doing the same task because of the differences in metabolism. So it's inherently cheaper for women to be able to do it. However, we have had a much smaller fraction of women actually having the opportunity to do it because of the way our society works and because of discrimination and barriers that we are trying to remove. So things like these are sort of like what excite me and what I want to learn more about and study more about, because there's so many questions that are unanswered from a medical standpoint, from a human body and space standpoint, that I would love and explore to dig into, both from an engineering perspective and a science research medical perspective.
I think it saddened me to hear that we as women could be more efficient while working in space, but just due to societal norms, we were not given the exact rights. But I think with time, with professionals and young professionals like you coming into picture, trying to change the scenario in the industry, which is great. And so on that note, I would like to ask you, you being an advocate for young women in space and aviation, what's that one piece of advice you'd like to give to young girls who are interested to join this sector?
Yeah, when I was in the Civil Air Patrol, auxiliary of the US Air Force, my mentor told me when passion becomes so deeply rooted, it becomes persistence. And whenever I'm asked for advice, that's the quote I always give, because that's the quote that got me to where I am today. The biggest thing is believing in yourself goes a long, long way, especially as a woman or a minority in a space, in this sort of a space. You're going to get a lot of rejections. You're going to get a lot of doubt. People are not going to believe you when you tell them, this is your goals, this is what you want to do, this is what you're doing. people would laugh at you, people would say stuff, receive all of that, receive all the comments. But what's most important is being able to find that sort of fulfillment, validation, and belief within yourself, and being able to overcome that level of fear. For example, I got my pilot license about a year and a half ago, and the process in order to get my pilot license involved a lot of, dealing with flight instructors that are not necessarily supportive, dealing with a lot of factors and considerations that prolong this process of getting my license. I started flying in 10th grade of high school, and I've been flying since, and I really enjoy flying. I love taking up my friends and my family and stuff like that. But there was a lot of moments where, I felt like I want to give up. I was like, why am I doing this? Is it even worth it? So much time, so much effort. And a lot of those moments that come up throughout whatever goal it is that you're trying to achieve, it's important to remember why you started in the first place, and remember why you want to continue to do it. And just remember that, if you really truly want this, you are going to figure it out. Like Kalpana Chawla said, where there's a will, there's a way. And when you are so passionate about something, it'll work out in some form, in the best form. And you may not necessarily realize it until it's over, but most important is to just fully believe yourself throughout the journey, no matter what you hear from other people, and being able to find that confidence from within.
Your answer has inspired me, that is for sure. And I hope it does inspire the young women and girls who are going to watch your interview. So, with this, thank you, Priya, for joining us. And it was so much fun and exhilarating to learn your experience. It was rich to hear how you have carved your journey in the space sector. And I wish you all the very best for your future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. And I'd love to see where you guys come and go out of this.